welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I am finally getting to my Midnight Hunt retrospective. As usual, I like to go back after sets have been out for about a year and sort of look at how everything played out. See how popular those commanders ended up being, what are the most popular cards from the set, all of that stuff. See if the predictions that I made in particular, and maybe a lot of other people made, were accurate. You know, there's always going to be big surprises, so I like to go back and look at these sets and see how everything played out. It has been about a year since Innistrad Midnight Hunt came out. Obviously, this got pushed back a little bit. I was planning on doing it a couple of weeks ago. We have so many spoilers, just nonstop, that it sort of kept getting pushed back, but I'm finally doing it. Going back, looking at that set, and of course, as usual, I'm going to use edhrec.com, which is the best online database for looking at these sorts of things and seeing where everything has sort of fallen into place. You never can be completely accurate with how popular cards are or commanders, but I think that's probably the best way to do it. So let's go take a look. So here we are on EDHREC, Innistrad Midnight Hunt, and these are the most popular commanders from the set. And this was, you know, I guess one of the sets that I kind of got wrong more than any other. I got a lot of things wrong about this set. I'm not sure exactly what the reason was. Maybe I just had a lot of stuff going on at the time. Didn't have enough time to properly evaluate a lot of the cards, particularly the commanders. I think I was a little bit way off on. I just did my commanders I was wrong about video a little while ago, and then before that, a couple weeks before that, I did cards I was wrong about, and there was a lot of Midnight Hunt stuff in there. So let's take a look. I think, to no one's surprise, the most popular commander from this set is Tovolar, Dire Overlord. What I've come to realize, and again, a couple of the commanders that I was wrong about, Miram, the Temur Dragon Commander there, and Giada, which I never even talked about, because I'm like, Mono White Angels, who wants to do that? So what these three commanders have in common is they're all tribal. And what I've come to realize is never underestimate the popularity of tribal. People really like tribal commanders, especially if can sometimes be, like in the case of Tovolar, I guess it is the commander that everyone was sort of waiting for, was a really good werewolf commander, because there is a lot of werewolf stuff and we never really had one. So no surprise here. I didn't talk about it at all. And the reason why is I tend to talk about commanders that, you know, this is EDH deck building. I'm talking about commanders that are good build-arounds. I mean, I guess it is technically a good build-around, but tribal commanders, there's nothing to talk about really with a tribal commander, especially with Giada. I mean, you just put angels in there, right? Funny enough, I did a deck doctor for one of my patrons recently who had a Giada deck. I did have quite a bit to say. But, you know, as a build-around, it's just you put a bunch of werewolves and wolves in there, obviously, right? I didn't love about this commander, you know, whenever a werewolf or wolf you control deals combat damage, draw a card, I was like, this is when they were really, and I remember this, it was starting to become every single commander, you know, whether it be tribal or otherwise, the payoff was draw a card. And I was like, okay, can we like do something else here? Like, we're getting a little bit too heavy into the whole draw card thing. So I thought it was a bit much. I looked at this card a few times when it came out, have not played against it once. You know, I tend to play against a lot of my patrons on my Discord, and obviously a lot of my patrons are playing the same kind of decks that I play. So I don't really see, you know, like I'm looking at this top row, haven't played against any of them. I haven't played against any in the second row either. So, you know, I tend to play against underwhelming commanders a lot because that's what my patrons play, right? Vadric, Astral Archmage. I mean, look at the drop off here. Again, this is another thing that I like to look at. You have Tovolar, which is one of the most popular commanders in the entire format, like 6,300. I imagine it's got to be way up there, probably in the top 30 for sure. And then there's a massive drop off of almost 4,000. Like, it's what? More than double, right? So Vadric's still pretty popular. 2,500 is a lot of decks. It used to be that 2,500 was a lot of decks. You know, when I first discovered EDH Rec, I think Atraxo at the time was the most popular commander, and it had like 4,000 decks or something, right? So it used to be that 2,500 was huge. That was a very popular commander. Now 6300 is a very popular commander. It's changed quite a bit because, of course, the format has gotten a lot more popular. I think maybe EDH Rec has changed their algorithm a little bit where they are collecting more decks as well, maybe. Vadric was one that I was wrong about. It is definitely, I did not think it was going to be the second most popular from the set. Nope. I thought, is it Spellslinger theme? Yay, here we go again, right? It's okay. I just, I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying there's so many options already for that I didn't think people would go after it, and clearly they have. We've got Lysa, Forgotten Archangel, which is okay. Again, I didn't think it was great. Whenever another non-token creature control dies, return that card to owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. I mean, there is a little bit you can do with that. If a creature an opponent controls would die exiled instead, is pretty handy. I don't think people are going to go after a commander because of that, though. Like, this first ability, I mean, obviously there's a lot you can do there. You can sacrifice your creatures. Then at the beginning of the next end step, you're going to get them to your hand, which is good. It's also board wipe protection, I guess. But then you have to recast it all. So that is a lot of work. It is a little slow. I'm pretty surprised this guy is as popular it is. Again, this is a set, if you look at my top 10 commanders from the set, that I was way off on. And I didn't talk about any of these three, or Adeline, or Old Stick Fingers. None of these top 5 were in my top 10. So, and again, it's not always about popularity. Sometimes when I make those lists, well, always when I make those lists, except for the ranking ones, a couple of times, like with Neon Dynasty, I did the ranking where I actually was doing it based on how popular those commanders I thought they would be. Whenever I do my best commanders from the set, and I literally just had a guy comment on the Warhammer 40k one I did about Gearson, and how I said in the video, I don't think this is the most powerful commander from the set. And he's like, well, why do you have it at number 1 if it's not the most powerful commander? And I was like, this is best commanders. Does best mean powerful? Maybe for some people it does. For me, it doesn't. For me, the best commander is the one that's the most interesting build around, not necessarily the most powerful one, right? Powerful doesn't make for a great commander, in my opinion. Some people it does, right? Everyone has their own opinion on it. So Adeline is another one that I'm really surprised. Again, I remember when this set came out, I watched a couple other channels, and some of them were gushing about Adeline and how good it was. They might have had it as the best commander from the set, and I was like, really? It's just again, I'm not saying it's not good, but it is doing that thing we've seen 1,000 times before. The mono white commander that's creating tokens and wants to be attacking all the time. That's like, there's a bazillion commanders that already do that. Now, maybe she does it better than anyone else. I don't know, but still, I didn't think people go after it because it's doing that same thing we've seen a million times before, right? Old Stick Fingers, I imagine that's just the combo stuff. Again, I didn't think this was a great commander because other than the combos, right? And again, going back to Warhammer 40k, there was the one mono black artifact commander that, I mentioned, the one that casts stuff for free out of your hand. I thought that was a really good ability that you could do a lot with. And the one that copies the activated abilities of stuff in your graveyard, everyone's like, oh, that one's way better. And I'm like, you can go off and I'm like, okay, does that make for a good commander though? I don't think so. I think the commander where I'm trying to assemble an infinite combo, that's not interesting to me at all. I don't think. And, I imagine a lot of those decks, it's still an interesting commander, but a lot of those decks are going to look the same. Old Stick Fingers, I think, is the same way, where you're going to have a lot of those decks that are just going to look the same, and people are probably just assembling that same combo every single time. Like whenever you cast a spell, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creature cards. Put all creature cards reveal this way. So I'm pretty sure what people are doing with this deck is they only put a couple of creatures in their deck. If you have 2 creatures that you want in your graveyard and you only have 2 creatures in your entire deck, you just cast this guy for 4 and it mills, you're not milling, it's going on the bottom of your library, but you are guaranteed going to get those 2 into your graveyard, and then you can go combo crazy time, I guess. I think I'm going to actually click on this because I'm curious what the, you're just going to animate. You're just going to mill a couple of giant creatures and then reanimate them. Mm-hmm. So we got all of the reanimate stuff in here. Yeah, you're just, again, that seems not interesting at all to me. Necrotic Ooze. So necrotic ooze goes in your graveyard along with whatever creature you want to copy it. Is that the idea? And then you reanimate it. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some combos here. I just didn't think it was a super interesting commander. I knew people would go after it for the combo potential, though. Pretty surprised it's the fifth most popular, though. Again, like I didn't talk about any of these five. I didn't talk about Catilda because, again, I'm just like, human creatures you control are mana dorks. That's okay. I mean, it's okay. I guess you would make a human tribal deck here for which there are, again, tons of options. Paying 6 mana to put a +1 counter on each creature you control is not good, right? I don't know how often you're going to use that. I certainly wouldn't build around that ability. If you're going to do a +1/+1 counter theme, that seems like you're going to be waiting a while before you could put counters on all your creatures. It's just a really bad Gavany Township, right? Again, what are people doing here? For me, the first thought is, yeah, having your creatures as mana dorks is okay, because then I guess you can just cast a big, Craterhoof Behemoth really early, but then all your creatures are tapped so they can't attack. I'm thinking creatures that I want to tap, like a Stony Brook Schoolmaster. When it becomes tapped, you create a token or something, but that's not a human, so that won't work, right? Has to be a human. So I don't know if there's any humans out there that you want to be tapping. King Makar, but again, he's black, so he won't fit in here. Really surprised. Really, this is one of the most surprising sets for the popularity of commanders. Slogurk is the one I had in my top 10 that has actually, I had it in there, and I actually ended up doing a deck tech on it because I realized that whenever a land card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it isn't one or more, it's if I traumatize myself, and that's the deck I made, is I traumatize myself, put half my library into my graveyard, and then I can put like 30 counters or however many counters, however many, if I put 50 cards into my graveyard or 40 or whatever, however many lands are in there, that's how many counters I can put on my commander. So it's very easy to then one-shot somebody. And of course, my commander has trample. And then all those other abilities are fantastic as well. I think this is a great commander. This is one that I would have, also an ooze, and I think a little bit of ooze tribal could be done here. This is one that I thought would be more popular. Florian, again, just thought that this was okay. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, look at the top X cards of your library. X is the total amount of life your opponent's lost this turn. Exile one of them. So I'm going to attack, or I'm going to do whatever. And there is a lot of neat cards you can fit in here. Like Pain's Reward, a card that I like a lot, would fit nicely into this deck, where if your opponent's lost that life, if they wanted to pay the life to draw the cards, then, this will it will trigger this, right? Because it's looking at its life loss, right? Yeah, amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. Exile one, but you only get to exile one of those cards, and you may play it this turn. You still have to pay for it. It's not like you can look at the top 10 cards of your library, pick out a giant thing, and then cast it for free. You still have to pay for it. So all this commander is doing, and I don't know, maybe people looked at this and go and went, hey, that's a really easy build around because all I want is my opponents to be losing life. Okay, but the payoff is I get one impulse draw. I mean, you do get to look and pick out something. That's pretty good. But still, you're just getting the one impulse draw, which is okay, I guess. I mean, the fact that you get to look at those cards, I guess, makes it a lot better. Still not a huge upside, though. Pretty surprised by that one. Lear, Disciple of the Drowned. Pretty interesting. I like that, the fact that spells can't be countered, and you sort of have to do a little bit of a deep dive about, okay, well, there are ways around that where I can exile spells, right? There are, counter spells that aren't actually countering that you can actually put in this deck, which is you can put like a Commandeer or something in this deck, which is interesting. And of course, that other ability is incredibly powerful. Just all your instants and sorceries have flashback. Pretty great. So I guess that's probably where I would expect that one. Gisa Glorious Resurrector I thought would be more popular, but again, because that ability is amazing. But again, like you just look at, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at Lysa, and I'm thinking Gisa seems way more interesting to me. And also has the exile your opponent's creature thing. And also people really like the gaining control of their opponent's stuff. But again, we might have gotten to a point now where people hate having their stuff stolen so much that this becomes as a commander a target, and people are just going to want to get it off the table right away, and you don't get really to enjoy it. Sigarda, Champion of Light. And again, another commander that I just didn't talk about at all. I think this is maybe the first one one of the first ones they spoiled anyway. Just kind of weird because humans you control, it's a human commander, but it's an angel. So that sort of, again, people like tribal. So I guess I should never, ever downplay a tribal card, because it doesn't matter. Even if it's not a good tribal card, like I don't think Catilda is, people will still go after it because tribal, I mean, building a human tribal deck is the easiest thing in the world. The most popular tribe in the entire game. And then on top of that, there's lots of support. So it's really easy to do. Again, though, like humans, I would rather have humans I control or mana dorks than humans I control get +1/+1. That's so boring. Like I don't love tribal commanders that are just giving a lame anthem like that. However, whenever Sigarda attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a human creature card from among them and put it in your... Like, that's not even good either. So now I need to have my commander attack. And I wonder how many people built this deck and then realized how little they got that trigger. So I have to attack with my commander, which it has flying, but I'm probably going to have to wait a turn. Then I also have to control 3 or more creatures with different powers. So I have to do all of that before I get this trigger. I get to look at the top 5 cards in my library. You might whiff, and I hate cards where whiffing is a possibility. I mean, 5 cards is pretty good, and if you're playing human tribal, the chances you're going to get one is good, but you might just get one, so you don't even get to choose. You're revealing a human card, and then you're just putting it in your hand. You're not even putting it in a play. You know, the payoff here isn't super fantastic. It's okay, I guess. And again, your commander's an angel, which is kind of weird when you're doing human tribal, so... Any of the other human tribal stuff you put in your deck isn't going to apply to your commander, right? That's kind of why I don't like when you have a tribal commander that is not the tribe that you are in, right? It's because then you put a whole bunch of human tribal stuff in here, your commander doesn't get to benefit from any of it, right? So, but again, it's a tribal commander, so everyone's going to go after it. Rim Corollas, Stalwart Slayer, another one that I had in my top 10. And I'm wondering now what was even in my top 10, because I don't recognize most of these. I mean, Slogurk was... Maybe was Lear, and I think Gissa was, right? Rim Corollas was because I thought this was great. Another one I did a deck tech on my channel because I just, there's a lot that you can do here, I think. I suppose it is probably where it should be. You know, 650 is okay. It's not great. There's just a lot you can do. Like if a spell would deal damage to you or another permanent you control, prevent that damage. That's pretty great, right? If a spell would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage +1 instead. And that's, again, you can do even more with that. So, Jaren, Corrupted Bishop. And I had this guy really high. Again, I just thought that it's very unique. It's very unique. It's very interesting. I probably had it too high. I probably made a mistake with this guy. The backside is incredible. Sacrifice a creature to draw a card is great. Also, 6/6 Flying Trample Lifelink is fantastic. But I guess I didn't realize how hard he is to flip. And I think a lot of people went after this commander and realized he's very difficult to flip because at the beginning of your end step, you have to have exactly 13 life. And it's very easy. I mean, you can pay life. So if you have a lot of pay life effects, it's very easy to get exactly to 13 life. But then you also have that 6 mana open. Your opponents can interrupt this, obviously. You can pay the 6 mana. And then as your thing's transforming, they can kill it in response, and you just wasted. Everything is waste. That's sort of the huge downside here is you jump through all these hoops, get to 13 life, pay the 6 mana, and then your opponent just responds with a Path to Exile and exiles your creature before you can do anything. That really sucks. And then now you're at 13 life, and you have to jump through all those hoops again. That's kind of poopy. Yeah. I get that. It is difficult. I just thought it's so unique and interesting. And then you'll have all the other stuff that's going on here. Like whenever Jaren enters the battlefield or another non-token human you control dies, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 white human. So there's that as well that you can build around. Again, it's sort of human tribal, but I guess people don't like this kind of tribal. I mean, you could really just build around that first ability entirely. And just if that last ability happens at some point, right? And because that first ability is losing you a life, it is kind of easy. Like if I'm at 14 life, all I have to do is have a human die, and I will lose a life and create the 1/1 token, and then I can, right? So I get it though. I probably had this guy too high. Seraph the Viper's Fang, which is one again that I think I did this guy on the why are they so unpopular? Like, why is this commander so unpopular? I had this guy very high on my list as well. I thought he's fantastic. Again, there's so much you can do here. It's mono green, but people like green. Tap creatures you control have death touch, which means you're getting in for damage all the time. Having your attacking creatures have death touch is fantastic. Your untapped creatures having hexproof is fantastic, obviously. And then you can do the untapping thing, which this commander is doing, and it's also untapping lands. I was very seriously considering. I put this in my Questing Beast deck, and because it's such a phenomenal fit there, because my Questing Beast has Vigilance, so when it attacks, it's not going to tap, so it continues to have hexproof all the time, which is another great way to use this. I almost had considered swapping this out as the commander, and I know that seems silly because those commanders have nothing to do with each other. But it is a little bit of Death Touch tribal, and that's sort of what you can do with Seraph is because you're attacking creatures of Death Touch, you can do that. And the fight mechanics work really good here, where I can attack with that creature and then use some... I can do an instant speed fight effect, or I can wait till my second main phase and use a sorcery speed one, right? There's lots of both. Because, of course, my Questing Beast has Death Touch, so I do a lot of the Death Touch tribal stuff as well. So it actually, I was considering swapping them out, because it worked really good. And then also you get to untap lands as well. Pretty good. Like, I think it's a pretty great commander. Jadar Ghoul, Caller of Nephalia, is not surprisingly towards the bottom. I will just say this is what this commander does incredibly well is get you dice triggers. It's 2 mana. It is immediately going to spit out a token as soon as it comes into play, because you get it on your end step, which I love. And then on your next turn, you're going to attack with your decayed token on your first main phase, or no, on your combat. And then on your second main phase, like, you're getting a dice trigger. Every turn you get a dice trigger. So if you have a Dark Prophecy or something, you're getting a card draw every turn. If you have like anything that says whenever a creature you control dies, it loves this commander, right? And then obviously you can do the sacking thing. You don't have to attack with the zombie token. You can sacrifice it to a Vampiric Rites or something. So now you're getting double the advantage, right? You're getting double the card draw, or you're getting, whatever. In fact, Vampiric Rites is a perfect fit because it gains you a life, which offsets the Dark Prophecy life loss. So it's just a very easy and generalized build around with regards to, obviously you can do the zombie token thing, so that works. But just dies, triggers, and sacrificing. Any theme that fits in the dies, trigger, or sacrifice theme works great here. And this guy just keeps replenishing, right? He keeps replenishing those zombies every turn so that you can use them. I think he's a pretty good commander if you're doing something like that. Odenik, I thought he would be a little higher. Man, second from the... And it's funny because these two are on the bottom. Ludwig was number 1 for me from this set. Because I thought he had a great ability. I actually think this is a fantastic ability. What I didn't realize is that the Mimeoplasm just does this better. Yeah, I didn't realize that when I did my list. I thought, man, this is such an interesting ability. Everyone's going to go after it. Copying creatures in graveyards. Lazav is another commander that sort of does the same thing. So I had forgotten about that. Again, I think I was rushing, so I didn't put a lot of thought into it. And as soon as people said, Ludwig's not that great, Mimeoplasm's just straight up better. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is, I guess, right? Like, he only costs 2, but his ability is going to cost a minimum of 5, which is what Mimeoplasm costs, right? And then obviously Mimeoplasm can target other people's graveyards. Also, you get green, and then I was thinking, oh, well, I can blink it and flip it back to the other side and then do a different creature. But with Mimeoplasm, you can blink it as well, so that doesn't work either. The only advantage here that I see is you don't get an ETB. Okay, that's the big advantage here. If you have a Phage or maybe a Phyrexian Dreadnought, right? So if I can exile a Phyrexian Dreadnought from my graveyard, this will flip over and it'll be a 12/12 with trample. And then I can also put counters on it if I want to. So it'll be really big. And obviously your commander. But you can also do like a Phage where it has a downside ETB because you are avoiding ETBs here. That's the only advantage that I see that Ludwig has over Mimeoplasm, which is not lots, right? So yeah, definitely I was probably not very accurate. I don't even know if this should have been in the top 10. Certainly should not have been number 1. And Denik, of course, I have a Denik deck. I love it. I have not lost with it. I think I'm 6-0 with it. I haven't played it in a long time though, of course, because you tend to play your newer decks, and I've made a few new decks since then. I think I've made 4 new decks since I made my Denic deck, so I tend to play those more. Also, I don't want to jinx it, because now if I play it, I'll probably lose with it. I love this deck. You can go watch it on my channel. I played this deck. I think he's great. He got a lot of crap talked about him. It is a little difficult you have to have your commander die. I mean, I guess you could play the front, but you have to have your commander die. Then you have to disturb it and have it come back into play, and then you can start going to town. That is a little difficult. True. However, the reason why it works so good is because if you have a sack outlet like an Ashnod's Altar, you want that for your commander, right? You want the sack outlet for your commander. Also, that same sack outlet works fantastically for putting creatures into your graveyard when you want to. So if it's approaching my opponent's end step and they haven't had and there hasn't been a creature card go to a graveyard yet, now I can use that same sack outlet to sacrifice one of my creatures so that I get the clue token, right? So the synergy's great there. Works really, really well. I love that deck. It's fantastic. I'm glad this isn't very popular. Really glad. All right, moving on to the 99 cards. Of course, we have these lands. That's always going to be the case with every set whenever you have a dual land of some kind. And these ones aren't bad. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. In like a standard format or modern, that's not great. You want the opposite because you want it to enter the battlefield untapped early. In Commander, though, not such a big deal, right? If this enters the battlefield tapped on turn 1, who cares, right? Don't need to get out of the gate very fast, do ya? Probably shouldn't, in my opinion. And then other than these lands, we have Infernal Grasp. Big surprise there, right? Like, again, I think I had this number 2 on my list of the best cards from this set. And I will just quickly look for my number 1. Where's my number 1? Oh boy, it's way down there. Where's my number 1? Fateful Absence. There it is. I thought Fateful Absence was better because it hit Planeswalkers also. Whenever I see Planeswalkers, I see red, right? So I just really hate Planeswalkers. So I love that this hits Planeswalkers as well. However, not at all surprised this is a card that I just was in love with immediately and then started to fall off a little bit. And the reason why is because the Planeswalker thing doesn't really come up that much. Also, you're letting your opponent investigate. Also, it's in white, right? And white has such fantastic removal already. That's why a lot of my deck, like a mono white deck, I think I have this in both my mono white decks, but that's it. I don't think I have it in any other decks. Because white just has fantastic removal already. Whereas Infernal Grasp, when this came out, I said they set a new precedent here where this is just a 2-mana instant that destroys any creature. You lose 2 life, who cares, right? There's no stipulation here. It doesn't have to be a certain mana cost or a certain color or anything. It's just destroy. Like, this is the most efficient black removal spell in the format, in my opinion. I know people like Snuff Out and stuff like that because you can cast it for free, but it doesn't hit black creatures, and there's a lot of black creatures in the format. So why the heck would you ever play that over this? Like, this is just the best targeted black creature removal spell in the format, in my opinion, and I'm not surprised. It's essentially it's the most popular card from the set. Vanquish the Horde, again, just one of the best board wipes in the format now. Just like with Blasphemous Act, this is just going to be usually 2 mana, destroy all creatures, which is fantastic. The only drawback here is that right after this, we had by invitation only, which I think I like more. I know people like having the cost reduction, and I talk about this with people all the time, how they like Wrath of God because it's a little bit cheaper, so they have more mana. After the board wipe, I can now cast a creature, and now I have some sort of an advantage. Okay, but the board wipe is supposed to be an advantage already. Why are you casting a board wipe if you're destroying more of your creatures than your opponents? That doesn't make any sense. You cast a board wipe when your opponents have a huge creature advantage. Then you cast the board wipe, and the board wipe is the advantage all on its own. I don't need to cast a creature afterwards. I've already gotten tons of... I've played 1 card and destroyed all my opponent's creatures. Maybe I've destroyed a couple of mine, but I should already have a massive advantage there with a board wipe, or why am I casting it, right? So, the argument that people make where, well, I like Vanquish the Horde because I can pay 2 mana for it and then cast a creature after, and now I'm up above. Okay, but you have already gotten a massive card advantage. Yeah, maybe you're in the same place as everyone else as far as creatures go, but card advantage wise, you've just used one card to wipe out 5 or 6 of each of your opponents, right? So that's the way I look at board wipes. So for me, by invitation only, probably I like better than this. I like it. First of all, it's a sacrifice. It gets around a lot of things. Secondly, it works particularly well in a go wide strategy. Again, if we're talking about advantage here, this Vanquish the Horde is going to destroy all your creatures as well. By invitation only, if I'm in a go wide strategy and I have 12 creatures, I can pick 7 and all my opponents sacrifice all their creatures and I still get to keep 5. Huge advantage me, right? So that's why a lot of times I will put by invitation only over that. And then of course, after that, we got Farewell, which is like, again, 6 mana, who cares? It's just an absolute blowout a lot of times. So for me, I'm Austere Command is still one of my favorites. Farewell, those two are the best in my opinion. I don't care that they cost 6 mana. I'm going to be casting them late in the game anyway. I'm not going to be casting them on turn 2 or 3. I'm going to be casting them late in the game when I have lots of mana, and I'm getting such a massive advantage. It's such a blowout that it doesn't matter if I can cast something after. I don't care, because I just wiped out all the artifacts and enchantments and I still have all my creatures or something, right? So like the modal aspect is why those cards are so good. So Austere Command and Farewell are top for me. Probably I would go by invitation only and then Vanquish the Horde if I'm ranking whiteboard wipes, which apparently I'm just doing impromptu here. Okay, Meathook Massacre, which I didn't even mention, I don't think. And the reason why is because it's a bad board wipe. It is still, like, look at it. It's an $80 card. I imagine it's getting played in Modern or something. Like, in Modern, this is a fantastic card because X is 2. So 4 mana X is 2 is probably going to kill all the creatures because you don't have big creatures in Modern. So this is really good against like a Merfolk deck or something, or an Elf deck or something, because they're all little creatures. So X is 2 is going to kill everything. And then again, that life gain is going to be a huge, huge swing. Like, I don't see this in Commander that often. It is pretty good. As a board wipe, it's terrible, right? Like, giving -5/-5 to a 6/6 creature is meaningless. It doesn't really do anything. I guess at the time they're not going to have a very good blocker, maybe, but that is not accomplishing anything. So, and by the way, -5/-5 is going to cost you 7 mana. 7. That's a ridiculously horrible board wipe. You're going to play this for the Blood Artist effect, I think. And whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So that's where you want to play this probably more, is my creatures are dying so I can drain my opponents. I mean, I understand that when you cast it, you kill all your own creatures and drain your opponents for a bunch. Okay. But you just killed all your creatures. So it's a good card. I've put it in decks. I've had this in decks before. I just think it's way overrated. People just, I don't know what was with people when this card came out. People were saying it's the best card from the set, which I think is bonkers. But speaking of which, Augur of Autumn, and this I had, again, this was very high on the list for me. It was number 3. It is a good card, and I think I might have talked about this in a video, actually. I was a little too high on this card because, again, I was thinking Oracle of Moldiah, which everybody loves. I actually don't. And I think it's an improved version. Like the whole reveal the top card of your library, I don't love that. That's not a good thing to do in a Commander game, because you're essentially showing your opponent what you're going to draw every turn. That's a huge disadvantage, right? Or revealing your hand, showing your opponents what you have in your hand. That's a huge disadvantage in a Commander game, and I don't like it. And this was a fixed version of that. They don't do the whole reveal thing anymore, really. They just do you look at the top card of your library anytime. And if you have Coven, you can cast creature spells from top of your library, which is also pretty good. So it is a good card. I think I was a little too high on it. Adeline, again, it's kind of funny. The reason why this is such a popular card is because of exactly what I said. And exactly why I didn't think it would be that popular as a Commander, because there's so many decks doing this already. That's why this card is also really popular in 99. It's in 32,000 decks because so many decks are already doing this, right? So this slotted into the 99 of a lot of decks. Morbid Opportunist, the card that I was probably most wrong about from this set. Again, I did not do this set well as far as evaluation. This card's fantastic. And it's funny because the mistake I made with this card is the mistake that I think everyone makes with Dennick, which is this triggers only once each turn phrase, which can be off-putting. But if you think about it, doing something once on every single person's turn is actually really good. So if I'm in any deck, this can be good because creatures are dying all the time. If I'm in particular a deck where I am killing my opponent's creatures or sacrificing my creatures is extra good. Just an absolute commander staple, in my opinion, for forever. And I'm actually surprised it's not in more decks. This card's fantastic. Unnatural Growth, again, a card I didn't mention. I actually like that it has so many green pips, so that means you're only going to play it in, playing in a mono green deck and then maybe a 2-color deck. Like, I don't know how many decks where you're playing more than 2 colors this is going to go in. It would be tough to cast. It's obviously a very powerful ability. It just does the big stompy thing really well. It's not super exciting, but whenever you see these cards, same with the ones that double damage and all that kind of stuff, they're always going to see play in the format, no question. Sereth is in the 99 of a lot of decks. No doubt about that. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Consider... Why do people like these cards? It's so low impact. I hate cards like this. I never play them. They're only good in a deck where you want to be cantripping, right? This is a card that in modern or standard, it's good, but it's so low impact. I've talked about this so much on my channel. You may look at the top card of your library and put that card into your graveyard and then draw a card. That is so low impact. So you look at the top card of your library, and if you want it in your hand, you leave it there so you can draw it. And if you want it, like it's opt, except instead of putting it on the bottom of your library, putting it in your graveyard. Again, opt is a card that I would never put in a deck. Unless you want draw triggers, even then it's not great. I would rather get, a bunch of draw triggers all at once. Niv Mizzet, like the Niv Mizzet decks is the only place I would play this. Niv Mizzet Perron. So low impact, guys. Like, I don't get why people go after cards like this. Ponder, Preordain, all of those. You are only getting it's a cantrip. You are replacing the card that you are casting. That's all. It is very, very, it is not really card advantage at all. You just get to look at the top cards of your library. That's all, which is okay, right? Moonsilver Key. Funny enough, this is a card, I gave it an honorable mention because I'm like, is this going to see a lot of play in the format? I guess it probably will, but it was a tough one to evaluate. And funny enough, I just made a short about this, which should be coming up soon. The more I use this card, and I just made a deck for myself where I put this guy in the deck because it's an artifact themed deck, and I'm just like, man, this card's great. You can get a lot of stuff. I won't spoil it for you, but watch the short when it comes out, and I go over all of the really neat possibilities you can use Moonsilver Key for. All right, one more row here. Cathar Commando. Again, one of the cards that I was wrong about because I undervalued it. It's phenomenal. I love this card. I just love creatures that have ability stapled on them. 2 mana 3/1 with flash already is good, and then being able to sacrifice to destroy an artifact or enchantment, fantastic, and you can reuse it. Basically everything I just said. Malevolent Hermit, same thing. This is another card that I missed. These 2 cards are fantastic. I missed both of them. I think I talked about both of them in my cards that I missed from the year that I did at the end of last year. Great, fantastic cards. No question about it. And both of them are in my Denic deck, funny enough. We got Gissa, Glorious Resurrector, Jadar, both in a lot of the 99 of a lot of decks. No surprise there. And Triskaidekaphile, wow. It's funny how... And I'm not going to name names here, but there was a particular channel that I watched, after the set came out that said, oh, this card's terrible. 4 mana to draw a card? That's awful. And I'm just thinking, are you kidding me? First of all, you have no maximum hand size is a thing that people obviously want in their decks. That's why Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel are still like $4 cards, even though they've been reprinted 1,000 times. But more importantly, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 13 cards in your hand, you win the game. So... any deck that is already doing the big hand size thing, this automatically slots into, which it looks like there is 19,000 decks doing that, right? Again, for me, I put this in my Tishana deck right away because that's a deck. It became a win con in my Tishana deck because that's a deck. I'm already doing the no maximum hand size thing, obviously, on my commander. That's a deck where I am probably going to have a big hand. And all I do is just wait until I have 13 cards in my hand, or I guess 14 cards in my hand, play my Triskaidekaphile, or maybe I have 12 cards in my hand and I also have some mana open and I can pay the 4 to draw a card right before my upkeep, right? It's just a great win con. A great alternate win con. Why wouldn't this see lots of play in the format, right? All right, moving on. We got to talk about the Midnight Hunt Commander stuff as well. And this is one of the first sets where Like what they used to do when they started doing the commander content with every single set, they just had the 2 decks. For the longest time, they just had 2 commander decks that would go along with the set. I think the set before this, Forgotten Realms Commander, is where they're like, okay, well, let's just do a bunch. Whale Halt, the Rot Cleaver, which I had, I think, number 2 or 3 on my list. No big. I said this is going to be the most popular zombie commander now. Obviously, that's the case. It has almost 10,000 decks. It is even more popular than I thought it would be. I mean, we're talking about, and I mean, we can go check here. Where is it? Is it top 10? It is. It's number 9. The 9th most popular commander in the entire format. Wow. Didn't see that one coming. For sure. I knew it would be popular. I didn't think it would be that popular. Kylar is another one that I was like, really? And it's funny because I just saw, I believe it was the MTG Goldfish guys talking about commanders. They're like, why is this so popular? I don't get it. And this was one of them. And I'm like, yep, I don't get it either. I mean, I know a lot of people will say, and maybe they'll say the same about Giada. I mean, there's obviously some there's a lot of similarities here. Okay, I get my creatures into play and they got a bunch of counters on them. And then I just have a bunch of big creatures. Okay, that seems really boring to me. And also really easy to foil, like a board wipe, and now what? Giant creatures die to a board wipe just as easily, usually, unless it's a toxic deluge, I guess. So for me, all of the downsides of, I guess this is just how I look at commanders when I want to build around them, is all of the downsides to what I would normally do in this deck, my commander isn't preventing that at all. And the upside I'm getting is just, oh, my creatures are bigger. Like other humans you control get +1/+1 for each counter on Kylar. Okay. So they're going to be big. I guess it's kind of neat that you can put any kind of counter on your Kylar. That's kind of neat. But nevertheless, just I'm making big creatures. This is all this deck is doing. And also only humans. My commander is essentially just a really big anthem. That's kind of boring to me. I don't know. Like 3,100, that's a lot. I can't believe how popular this guy is. Lindy Cheerful Tormentor. This is not surprising. I actually thought it would be more popular. Again, look at the drop off, by the way. Almost 10,000. All the way down to 31. Again, if you go back to the other one, you had the second place guy was 2,500. So he actually has less decks than Kylar and Lindy. So that also says something. I mean, dedicated Curse Commander. No surprise there that's popular. Eloise, again, pretty big drop off here. Like more than in half. Eloise, Nephilia Sleuth. This is a really interesting commander. And of course, there's the infinite combo with March of the Machines. I don't know if there's any others, but just I think this is one that I thought would be more popular. Whenever another creature you control dies, investigate. Tons you can do there. Whenever you sacrifice a token, surveil. This is the only commander that is doing. Is this the only commander that's doing surveil? I think it is. So now we can do a little bit of surveil tribal. Pretty neat, I think. Lenore Autumn Sovereign, again, another one I just talked about in commanders I was wrong about. I was wrong about a lot of commanders from this set. As far as, I have my personal opinions. When I say wrong about, I'm just like thinking, I didn't think anybody would go after this, and they did. People really like, I'm a huge Selesnya fan, as I just talked about my Selesnya staples. I've noticed a lot of really popular Selesnya commanders from this set. The other ones, again, people must love that color combination. I know I do. It is a great color combination. Maybe that plays into this a little bit. Color combinations do. I just talked about why I don't like Izzet and I never play Izzet. And a lot of people are like, I don't like Golgari, I don't like this, I don't like that. If you just don't like certain color combinations, obviously those commanders aren't going to be nearly as popular. And I think a lot of people like Selesnya, as I do as well. But this one, again, I just did not think. 1,200 is quite a bit. It's not a ton. Look at compared to Wheel Health, but still 1,200 is way more than I thought. I thought this was, again, kind of boring. If we just look at this as separate abilities, being a combat on your turn, put a +1 counter on a creature you control, is that going to make you build around this deck if you put a +1 counter on a creature you control every upkeep? That we literally just had the Warhammer one. Doesn't the Teamer Warhammer one on your combat put a counter on a creature, right? And then the other ability is way more interesting. If this was just then draw a card, that's pretty good. It's a Phyrexian Arena. You just get to draw an extra card every turn. That's not bad. Again, if I'm looking at the commanders from this set, like Tovolar or, a lot of other commanders, there's so many commanders that can draw you way more cards than just one per turn, right? This just draws you maximum 1 card per turn on your turn. And there's also a stipulation attached to it. People maybe don't like that I complain about a commander that they like, but for me, I'm surprised. That's all. People can do whatever they like. I have an underwhelming commander series where I encourage people to play essentially really bad commanders. I love it. Great. Go ahead. I'm just really surprised that people went after this because I thought it was kind of boring and the payoff is just kind of okay. Speaking of which, Gork's a Tomb Shell, which I thought, it's not great. I knew it wasn't going to be popular. The bottom is like, come on, this guy, I can't believe it has 44 decks. I don't even remember what this does. All I remember, it was bad. It enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of mana spent to cast it. Okay, so you can put as much mana as you want into this. That's kind of good. Remove a counter from it. Prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn to another target creature with a +1 clause. It doesn't even prevent damage. It's not even like a Spike Weaver that just prevents all damage. It is just prevents damage to one creature. I guess it can be your opponent's creature, but why would you want to do that? But that creature has to have a +1/+1 counter on it. Like, that ability is terrible. And also, you can't prevent the damage to your commander. You can only prevent the damage to another creature. Ugh. It's a tree folk, I guess. I'm actually surprised this has 44 decks. Again, I'm the underwhelming commander guy, and I'm looking at this going, oh man, that's not very good. Gorex, though, again, I ended up doing after the set was already out for a while, I'm like, man, I made a really interesting decks with Gorex. So I'm like, I'll just throw it on my channel. And that's what I did. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you exile any number of creature cards from your graveyard. And of course, having your commander cost less is great. And so all you need is 3 and your commander cost 2. Having a 4/4 Death Touch creature for 2 mana is pretty good. But more importantly, when it attacks or dies, you choose a card at random, exile the Gorex, and put that card into your hand. So if you attack, you return a card to your hand. Then if your commander dies, you put a card in your hand. So if you have something like Transmute, one of my favorite abilities, I can transmute, and all the transmute cards are in black and blue. I transmute creature, it goes to the graveyard. I can exile it with my commander and then get it back into my hand so that I can transmute and tutor for something else. I thought there's a couple neat little interactions I had there. It's not a great commander. I will absolutely admit it's where I would expect, but there is some neat things you can do there. All right, let's quickly check out the 99 cards. Crowded Crypt is one that I definitely missed. I think it's a pretty good, I like having mana rocks that I'm getting another benefit as well, where it's just not adding mana. I'm also getting something else. Crowded Crypt is a great one that I definitely missed. That can go in a lot of decks where you have creatures dying all the time. I don't even know what this card does. If you control your commander, you may cast this spell. So, I think we're starting to get into the situation where any of these cards that say, if you control a commander, as you cast a spell, you may choose both. Target player draws X cards, target player mills twice X cards. So I guess if you're in a mill strategy, this is good. So is that the only place we're playing this? Because this is the only place I would ever play this. I've seen a lot of people, when I'm doing my deck doctors and stuff, put mill cards in a strategy that isn't milling. If you're not in a milling strategy, do not play a mill card, ever. I see people play Alter the Brood or Mindcrank when they're not even in a milling deck just because it fits the theme of what they're doing. But milling your opponents is not giving you an advantage. In fact, it might be even a disadvantage if they're playing a Marin deck or some other graveyard deck. I have a couple of decks where you want to mill me? Okay, like my Danik deck, for example. You're going to mill me? That's probably going to put creatures into my graveyard, which is going to get me a clue. So I'm totally okay with that. Like, there's tons of cards out there that are going to X draw you cards, like Stroke of Genius. The fact that this gives you the added bonus of milling, so what? If it's not an advantage, then why would you like, if you're not doing that anyway, why would you do it? I think people put a little bit too much faith in milling. If you're actually in a milling strategy, it's good. But if I'm just in any old deck, like that Vadric deck or whatever, now I get to draw 7 cards and I'm also going to mill you for 14. I guess the thinking is maybe I'll put something very important in their graveyard that they wanted. Great, but I got an Eternal Witness in my hand. So now you just essentially let me draw that card. It can be a bit of an illusion, milling, where it seems really good, but you can actually be helping your opponent out, right? Maybe I have Eternal Witness, Regrowth, Road of Return, a million effects that do that thing, right? So now you just put 14 cards in my graveyard that now, I'm like, there's the card I really want. I'll e-witness and get it into my hand. Thanks, buddy, right? Or if I'm in any sort of a graveyard strategy, or maybe I just happen to have a recursion spell in my hand, again, and you just helped me out. So if you're putting this card in a deck, I'm going on a huge rant here, so I'm going to end with this. If you're putting this in a deck where you are not milling, or I guess you can mill yourself, this is target player, so if you're in a self-mill deck, it works as well. If you're not in any of those strategies, like you're just playing a Vadric deck, don't use this. Just use a straight up Stroke of Genius, because I know you'll look at this and go, oh, well, I'm going to have my Vadric out, my commander out, so that I just get the added bonus of milling my opponent as well. Yeah, but it might not be. Whether or not it's an advantage for you, like how is it an advantage for you? You're not in a milling strategy, so you're not going to win that way. There is a chance you put an important card they want into their graveyard, but there's also an equal chance that they can then get that card out of their graveyard and you just help them. That's my rant on that. I like this card. Obviously, I didn't talk about because I was like, unless you're in a milling strategy, why would you want to do both of those things, right? Anyway, that is it. That is all my Midnight Hunt retrospective. Probably went a little longer there. I tend to go on rants. I can't help myself, but there was a lot of talk to talk about. And again, this, for whatever reason, and as I suspected, I was wrong about a lot of things. Looking back at this set, and this is why I like to do this, I'm like, man, I was way off on a lot of things. This set in particular, for whatever reason, I don't know if they had a lot of content coming out at the time or what. I mean, it was last September. What was going on last September? I was really, especially with the commanders. You know, the commanders can be a lot harder to evaluate sometimes. The 99 cards, not as much. The commanders, I was way off on a lot of them, without question. But, you know, whatever. It is just a guess, right? So there we go. What was the most surprising for you guys, right? Again, going back, looking at this set, I like to see, hey, how did everything play out? What was the most surprising for you guys as far as the most popular commanders or unpopular commanders or 99 cards or whatever? Let me know in the comments below. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.